Good afternoon, everybody, and very welcome to the Seeds of Bravery Health, Life, MedTech Soft Landing workshop. Today we will be, sorry, just get next. So I'm going to introduce you to Seeds of Bravery, which is a European project, 20 million euro, and it's driving innovation and empowering startups and forging connections that transcend borders. More than just funding, Seeds of Bravery is about cultivating a dynamic, innovative, and sustainable tech environment that delivers meaningful impact and transformative change. Since its launch in December 20th, 2023, the Seeds of Bravery project has become a driving force in fostering innovation and strengthening the tech ecosystem of Ukrainian startups. We've already allocated over 3.6 million euros in funding has been distributed to over 150 startups, 980 plus proposals received, and we continue to work with many Ukrainian startups and receive applications from Ukraine and right across Europe, from Poland, UK, Germany, Ireland, Spain, Estonia, and many others. Submissions are predominantly targeted from deep tech, infrastructure, education, and science. The consortium of Seeds of Bravery is 19 partners, 17 organizations from right across Europe, as well as 2 associated partners. One of those is DLA Piper, who are participating in today's webinar. Within Seeds of Bravery, there are 5 different programs to which startups can apply for funding. These include innovations, entrepreneurship, rebuilding Ukraine, DTech scale-up, and startups. These offer grants of up to 25,000 euro. But Seeds of Bravery isn't just about funding. Seeds of Bravery is about many more non-funding opportunities. These are programs like the Deep Tech Incubator programs, the Accelerator programs, the Science to Business programs, free tickets to attend major tech exhibitions, market discovery workshops that have covered up to 19 different geographies, and the videos of which are on the Seeds of Bravery YouTube channel, co-working spaces, market fast track programs where our startups build go-to-market strategies, and Summer School of Entrepreneurship. Seeds of Bravery is about cultivating a dynamic, innovative, and sustainable tech environment that delivers meaningful impact and transformative change to rebuilding Ukraine. Today, the organizing partners are Access BIC and EIT Health. My name is Fionnuala Wall, and I am the EU Projects Manager with Access BIC. We are based in Cork and in Ireland, and we work with startups and entrepreneurs from startup to raising investment to scaling. Today, we are going to look at the health, life sciences, medtech soft landing structure. First of all, we're going to hear an introduction and overview of the EU health industry, including demands, competition, and an overview. Then it'll be followed by legal and regulatory details. Then we're going to look at the opportunities for mentorship and guidance within the medtech industry in the EU. We're going to hear from 2 startups who will share their experiences of soft landing. And then we will have a panel discussion around the investment landscape and funding opportunities in the health, life sciences, and medtech. So delighted this afternoon to introduce Anish Shindor from GST Health, who will give us the introduction and overview of the EU health industry, including market demands and competition. Anish. That's great. Yeah.
Can you see my screen?
No, not anymore. It's disappeared again.
All right, let's try this again. How about now?
Yeah, we can see your second screen. Yeah.
Perfect.
Fantastic. I leave this floor to you, Anish. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So thank you so much for the privilege in having me over here. It's really a great honor to help share some of the experience that I've had in my career working with pharmaceutical industry as an investor and also as a mentor working for EIT Health through the last years. What we're going to do is, so you'll see me 2 times today. One on the overview of the EU health industry, including market demands, where we'll really focus on what exactly are some of the things that are triggering this, and then we'll go into the mentorship at a different hour today. Now, one of the things that we speak about, and I wanted to just step back, is we speak about this digital health transformation that's happening, right? And that is impacting different areas. And EU, as you know, for being as archaic but as structured as possible. It provides good guidance, but also different frameworks and limitations that you need to actually use to enter within Europe. Some of them are related to regulatory ones. So all of you or most of you may have heard about MDR, the medical device regulation pieces. You may have heard about the health technology assessment that you may need to use in order to launch within Europe. And then lastly, there are a lot of ethical and legal compliance aspects that you need to think about when entering Europe. Especially now, there are specific AI policies that can be used because it's not only something that is trending, but it's also something that is going to be impacting our lives quite a bit. So people are getting more and more conscious about the use of their data and how exactly it can be put into some sort of purposes without or with somebody's consent. There are pieces related to technical piece. Now, one of the things that you look at from an EU perspective, we all consider that within European Union there would be one single way of working. Actually, that's not true, right? Each and every country, they have their own systems. And in some countries, for example, like Spain, you have even different autonomous communities that actually dictate what sort of health regulation and what sort of reimbursement schemes that need to be put out, which basically needs repetition in education and training, upskilling, and also talent creation. So there's a really important need of having good talent, but also that's something that can scale across the society. And then one of the last thing within Europe that all of us know, but it's something that we never speak about, is in terms of the involvement that patients have within innovation is actually very less. It's more of, I wouldn't say afterthought, but it's when you have a proof of concept or something that is validated, already created, is when you bring in patient in order to test it out. And it's for their own safekeeping as well, right? But one of the most important things that you need to look at when thinking of commercializing within Europe is um, the the model itself is created where patients are actually, or ourselves, right, as patients are not used to paying for our health. So you have to somehow find ways in which you go through organizational or health systems in order to ensure that that payment process can happen. And we have a quick a walkthrough within the limitations of time of what that means. And on other topics, right, you know, with the crisis, that there are unprecedented ways and faster speeds in which some of the things can be executed. Europe has been slow in adopting those, but some of the countries have been going faster than the others, and we'll see it in the next slide. Now, what is that opportunity that we see right now? From a and whichever way you want to start, my favorite part is market access, but let's go with regulation, right? We are in a very sensitive in the industry, and it's very important that we take those things seriously. And we need to make sure that the regulatory system, a lot of people think that this is a bureaucratic part of the entire health policy, but it's actually not. It's designed to ensure that people like ourselves are safe when they are using certain technologies. There is I mean, you hear about exploitation through data and stuff like that, and that's one of the things that regulation tries to protect by making sure that you are doing proper surveillance and you are actually ensuring that the proper consents are put in place before anything is used. The other part is majority of the European system are reimbursement-based system. Let that be through the public social security, or let that be through insurance. That is the primary way in which you can launch any of your medtech, digital health, or any of these solutions. And that's very important for you to know, because a lot of times when I talk to startups, they talk about commercialization and they think about, oh, let's go through pharma as a commercialization partner, or I'm going to actually launch this on the store, on the app stores, and people are going to pay for that service. In Europe, that is actually not the marketplace to do that. In US, absolutely. UK, potentially. But Europe is actually still not that place where people are still open and willing to pay, take out their card or their cash to pay for their health. It's something to think about when you look into it. And then market access. There are different, let's say, um, toll booths that you have to go through in Europe in order to ensure that you get to that last mile, which is get your solution in the hands of the patient. It is not as easy as it may seem. If you look at pharmaceutical drugs, they have a ton of sales reps that actually are visiting healthcare professionals, and it's not about like taking making that drug top of mind, but that only piece of what exactly is the patient profile and why is this drug fit for that patient profile. It's an education reminder and a training aspect of it that you have to do. And the only way today in Europe that you're able to successfully measure that there is a change in mindset of people is through do that model, and that's a very expensive model. So that's something that you need to keep in mind, is how exactly am I going to get this device or this solution in the hands of the patient. Now, there are several business models, right? So all of that sounds very complicated and difficult, and it is difficult on purpose, so that cannot be destroyed or demolished that easily, right? But where we see a market, or where we see that opportunity to commercialize, is within these five buckets, which basically pose two different business models. One of them is through digital services and solutions that add value to the drug sales, or you have some of them which are standalone digital therapies that can be put in front. One of them is simple, as easy as increasing adherence. If you look at most of the chronic illnesses, adherence to medications or compliance to medication is less than 50%. So around 30 to 40% is where most of the diseases that you're looking at are patients are compliant with that. The other part is from an improvement of in differentiation perspective. In order to have a patient motivated, if they are going to drop off the therapy, we need to find ways in which they keep on being motivated in order to use that. That's where a lot of behavioral therapies have come into play, where you educate patients about what exactly the use case is, and more importantly, what good could look like. Most of the times when we are sick, we don't really understand what good means, or we create a much lower baseline of how good we feel. And that's one of the critical parts of improving differentiation through beyond the pill solutions. There are some markets in which there is a potential of IP extension, but that's a very deep topic. We can talk about it later. But these are the two other ones in terms of access to data and new revenue streams that we can look at. One of the biggest achievements or biggest value propositions from if you are a digital company is that you have access to data, but not only that, you have access to data beyond the clinical setting. And this is differentiating. Most of the times in a hospital or a clinical setting, doctors, nurses, they have access to their data in that point in time. But as soon as you step out of that clinic, the environment becomes more dynamic. The reasons why which you do not follow your treatment become very different, and that data, those data points are actually not captured today. So that access to data gives us a lot of opportunity a wealth of opportunity in order to move that forward and take care of the patients beyond the clinical setting as well. And then within the digital therapeutics area, where software acts as a drug, we have opportunities, and we have proven opportunities in cognitive behavioral therapy, mindfulness, where there are a lot of companies who have commercialized and who have shown a big difference in the marketplace. Now, all of this is quite easy to say, but there's actually some research that we have done on it, where we've looked into five different areas. We've looked into patients' engagement. We've looked at real randomized clinical trial data as well. We've looked into specific regulatory pathways. We've spoken to payers, and we've looked at how can digital health be commercialized, because you remember I said it takes a lot of money and a lot of man force to actually, man and woman force, I don't want to be sexist over here, but it takes a lot of man force to actually bring out new developments in therapy out in the market. So what our research shows is with some of the companies that we've spoken to, we've had patients on in chronic conditions that have showed very high engagement rates even after 6 months. Now, 6 months may sound very little, but if you have, or if you know of anyone who is diabetic in your family, friends, or whoever, you would know that they are probably not continuing that therapy after the first 3 months. And that is really sad. That's how degradation happens. That's where escalations in specific chronic illnesses happen, and that's where some comorbid conditions develop. So 6 months is actually an extension of 6 months is very, very good, and that from a change in behavior is very, very important. Then you have Propeller Health, where 80% of patients with asthma still use their Propeller Health solutions beyond the 3 to 6 month enrollment. And then Belong Life, we've looked into in terms of the duration of sessions itself, where people are able to invest about 70 to 90 minutes per month on a Belong Life session. Now, that if you look at the social media usage I have, I don't even get to that these days. So it's very, very important in order to contextualize some of these things on what we are doing. And then on a clinical trial perspective, we've seen fabulous results in 20 to 30% decrease in anxiety and depression with the baseline targets that exist today. On the regulatory pathway, you'll see on the next slide, we have multiple ones in the market right now within Europe, China, and other countries. And then from a payer perspective, there is a little bit of a healthy skepticism, right? What do payers look for? They look for reduction in costs and increase in volume of patient that you can do by reducing costs. So health economics is super important. And that is something that we've seen that most of the payers are actually open to prescribing digital health solution because they've seen at-home therapy working, which reduces an overall cost. And then the last one, what we've seen is people, the first place when you feel sick is where you go. And initially it was Google. Now it's through some of the OpenAI models that you're looking at, and people look for this information. So those solutions can help educate and transform the understanding that people have in order to actually get more engaged into it. What we've seen within the European markets is, in Germany, there is DIGA. There are questions about how effective DIGA is, but at the same time, there are more than 40 different products, digital health products that are approved and reimbursed within this country. Belgium, they used to have mHealth model. This has now been upgraded or changed to something else. France, we've heard about Padura, sorry, not Padura, we've heard about Francis, which escapes me right now. I'm sorry. Padura is of the US one, but you have similar models for medtech and also digital health companies. And UK with NHS, NHS has actually formed a trust through which they are also investing in some of these startups as well. So this gives you a very concise but quick overview of where is Europe, what are the potential business models that you can look into, what is it that you need to take care of before you enter any of these markets, and how exactly you're going to benefit from that. So I know my 10 minutes are up, at least of the presentation. I'm open to questions if there are any. I mean, the presentation cannot be that good. So if you have any doubts or anything, please raise your hand.
No, Anish, I see there's one attendee with their hand up.
Okay.
So, Uliana, would you like to ask a question? Hello?
Juliana, if you're speaking, you're on mute.
Yeah, ask to unmute.
Hello, yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, now
We
I
can
can.
indeed.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just driving. I don't have I can't go to can turn on my
No
camera. So
worries.
okay, so my question is do you have an example of using healthcare technology assessment pathway? Because so we are going to Europe, German market, so now we are in the MDR process, and
Yeah.
I also wondering because yeah, so I hear that some healthcare providers and people from that industry says that this pathway actually doesn't work, so nobody use it. So what do you think about that?
I mean, look, I think it needs to be so. Does it work or doesn't it work? It's a much deeper question. Why it was created is what I can talk about. So health tech assessment, one of the biggest reasons why these were created in order were to make sure that um, from let's say drawing a line, a baseline target for each and every solution that is brought in, there is some sort of a validation that comes through from a safety perspective and other aspects of it. So when you look at it from that angle, yes, it does work because whatever you're putting in hands of any of the individuals or patients that is going to be using it, you are guaranteeing that this is actually cleared for consumer use. So from that perspective, on why it was created, I can understand. But I think maybe on the regulatory side of things, I don't know if that is something that is going to be spoken on within this session.
Yes,
But I
our
can.
next session is on the regulatory and legal details.
Perfect. So if your question doesn't get completely answered, Juliana, on that, I'll forward you some of the companies that have gone through it. And even if it's, let's say, a minimum that needs to be done, I think it's beneficial from a societal and from a baseline perspective. It's like getting a CE marking more than anything else.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. I will send you a note about that. Thank you again.
Perfect.
Thank you, Juliana. I've also put into the chat there for everybody that you can also ask questions via the Q&A function if you'd prefer not to unmute. So you feel free to use that as well. Anish, I don't think there's any other questions, but we are delighted that you're going to be back anyway after the break to give us another presentation. So at least people can have a think about it, and you can put your questions maybe in the Q&A if you have anything for Anish, and we can come back to those at later on in the webinar.
Sounds good.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Anish.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope you all had a refreshing break. So my name is Irina Gosha, and I represent EAT Health, European Institute of Innovation and Technology Health. Together with Access Peak, we are running this workshop today. So we are now dive into the second part of this session, and let's begin with the topic mentorship and guidance, opportunities tailored to the health and med tech industry in European Union. And our speaker is Anish Shindor from GSD Health. Anish, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Let's share this. All right. I hope the screen is back on sharing mode again. Now, this particular topic is quite close to my heart because of many reasons, right? I myself have had many significant mentors, friends who've actually guided from different disciplines who've guided me. One of them is on the call over here as well, Magda, and it's a very fulfilling way to actually gain knowledge in a very fast way, fast but also in a way that has been validated or disapproved by someone else, right? So it kind of gets to a path of a much faster success rate. And this is where it's important to understand where exactly do you need mentoring, right? One of the facts now, if you look into and this is if you look into biotech itself, when a specific drug is in its a discovery phase, there is a zero point 0.1 or 1% chance, let's say, that the drug will actually get commercialized. When you get to medtech space, the potential of the startup to actually get into a potential business from a concept to commercialization phase is about 3%. In digital health, that number is about 7%. So if you look at it, 90% of the startups fail because of many different reasons. So you have poor product, you have mistimed product, you have the wrong team, you have it may be completely a flawed business model, you're not really competitive, you've gone into a saturated market, there is no need itself of what you're looking for. And recently, I think in the last 2 or 3 years, what you've seen where a lot of companies have lost a lot of valuation of their business or actually don't have enough funds, that they've run out of cash. And those are the reasons why most of the startups actually fail. But if you think about it, in terms of when we are evaluating startups that we want to work with, and we are looking for advisors, we usually look at these 6 areas in order to define what that may be. So the first and foremost, it's very important from an organization perspective. All of them, I give them the same equivalence, and then you'll see in the next slides of where exactly what skills are needed. But the organization, the governance, the operational capabilities, or the model in which that the company is working is super important. And that acts as a pillar on the confidence that you generate from an investor perspective, and also from the consumer perspective. Regulation is a hygiene factor within the business that we are working in, so we need to make sure that our product is safe, it has high quality standards, and the usability itself is quite good. You need to look into more and more of the commercial areas. So a lot of times, one of the things that we um, see with startup companies is that they fall in love too much with their own product, and because of that, they feel any and all decisions that they're able to make, commercial, regulatory, even they are not subject matter experts on those, they feel that they are the right ones to make that decision. But that's actually not very true. You need to have very specific skill sets that you bring in order to help you out with those specific models. Go to market, market access. This is something that is always evolving. And the price point as well. What exactly is your pricing strategy to go in a specific market, and who is going to be paying for that? These are very critical elements when you look into go to market as well. And the product and technology piece and the clinical piece, together with regulation, we consider that hygiene factor. So your solution needs to be clinically validated. It needs to say what it's going to do, and it needs to do what it's going to say. There is no false claim, or there's no room for false claim over here within this space. And from a tech perspective, the expectation of the market is that you are doing things on the best possible platform, and the ones that have highest visibility. So these 6, let's say, constellations, this constellation of 6 stars is actually what we look at when we need to make sure that a business is successful. So if you, in your own reflection of the company, you start looking into these aspects, it's very important to find out where exactly your weak arm is. And that's where you need to make sure you find advisors, or you find subject matter experts that can come and help you out. Now, a lot of times, again, going back with these things, what are the key questions that we get when we are talking to certain startups, right? So, and especially from a scenario planning perspective, when we are looking into what exactly that investment deck would look like, what could be the key metrics, what are the governance, and some of the questions that I get, and I wanted to make it very tangible on the questions that we receive is, which is, do I have the right strategy to help me reach my business goals? It's a very simple and fundamental question, but it's something that a lot of times you get it wrong. Or do I have the right product offering for the right market that will meet the customer needs? So there are 3 different aspects that you're actually looking at. You're doing a more of a self-reflection on the product that you've created. You're validating that if the market is actually ready for it. And then the last one is my customer actually ready to use that at that moment? Super important one. And a lot of times there is that big bang effect that all the stars are aligning, and that magic happens. But that is not 99% of the cases. That's actually 1 or 2 times that those things happen. Most of the cases that does not happen, right? Now, how do I develop and validate the right business model for the company? A lot of times you come with a preconceived notion of this is the business model that I'm going for because that seems the most lucrative way, but then you hit a wall, and that's actually not the right payer for your solution. So you need to work in different ways. That has a big hit on the valuation of the company that happens. So you need to find the right people to help you out on that. And then on the organizational piece, how do I build my current team to ensure that I have the right capabilities to scale my business? A lot of times people get confused between being founders and CEOs of companies. Let me help make that difference very. So you can be founder of the best idea and the best business, but doesn't make it like very evident that you should be the CEO of the company, because the role of a CEO is much, it's more on the external stakeholder piece, which is creating those investor decks and things like that. Now, if you see that your profile is not that one, people need to be open and honest enough to say, hey, that's not my role. I would rather be the scientific person. I would rather be the technology officer. I would rather be the one who actually does the operationalization of the company. It doesn't have any impact on the amount of shares you have on the company, because as a founder, you'll still have the majority of the company. But as a role, you are placed in the right role. And then you are able to recruit the right people to actually drive your business forward. Again, seems very basic, but that's where a lot of people that we see fail in their businesses to actually do that. And then how do I differentiate from the marketplace? So really having an understanding of the market, where you are entering, who are the key players. A lot of times you'll realize that the market that you thought that you're entering is actually not that specific market. And with a small pivot, your market space, you're actually changing quite a bit. So when you look into some of the solutions that are there in the marketplace for insomnia, these companies thought they were actually fighting for territory um, within Headspace, Calm, and those companies. But it's actually what they found out when they were entering the market is they're fighting against the drugs that are actually given, the molecular therapies that are actually given by doctors to patients. And what they found out was these molecular therapies were actually much cheaper in price than the software therapy that they were providing. So guess what? The market is there is no need for the marketplace to increase the cost that they had and put that solution in place, especially when you have to do a very important change management on the physician perspective to adopt and accommodate such solutions as well, right? So it's very important to see what other offerings are there and who you are competing with. The story from a prospective buyer and investor perspective, I think it's super important. Europeans generally, we most of the European investors, and nothing against any of the ones that are on this call, but we look at any investment opportunity as a banking transaction. That if I invest X amount of money, what exactly is the return? It's not pure venture money. So compared to what you see within UK and within US, where there is actual venture capital, it's all risk-based, but it's also based on the opportunity and the impact that you can drive. And then the last one is in terms of how do you structure a specific raise? There are a lot of questions that people ask on, should I call my round a Series a pre-seed, a pre-Series a bridge, Series A, B? It's insane what all floats around, right? Rather than looking into what exactly have you achieved throughout that phase. So if you look into this, right, and this is where you can actually ask for support, is initial phases when you're in a pre-seed phase. Again, these stages can be different for your companies. They are definitely different between a medtech and a digital health company, and for sure with a biotech company as well. But what we see in general is where you need depending on the financial milestones that you put out there, a lot of VCs invest at a very early stage. They invest on the founding team, the technology, and the science. So they look for validation, they look for MVPs, they look for robust technology, and who exactly is selling this, right? What is the team structure, and what would be the team structure as you go forward? At a seed stage, what we usually see, and the expectation at seed stage has increased quite a bit in the last couple of years when the private equity market has not been that good, right? So look for advisors or seek for advisors who can help on structuring a business and a commercial model, or a business model and a commercial strategy. What would be the revenue plan? What is the organizational capacity? And let's not forget the technology and the science piece, right, over here. As we move forward, the expectation of the marketplace right now is to make sure that you have a proper go-to-market strategy, commercial launch, revenue optimization. So there's already an expectation that by the time you reach Series A, you need to have that first euro or dollar amount flowing through the pipes into your bank account. Now that's a big expectation that wasn't there in 2020 or 2021 right after COVID. That's the expectation market has. And the last one is in Series B, you need to have revenue. You need to show what your partnership strategy is, and you need to have had consolidated your marketplace. And what you need to focus on is expansion and diversification. Now, you can think about it a lot in terms of, so how do I make this happen? Do I need to hire all these people? Do I need to make sure that, no, this is where you need to use advisory committees, advisory boards, or you can have even people on your board with a minimum term of about a year or 2 years, year and a half to 2 years, that actually help you guide on these specific areas, which may not be a core of your business at the moment. Or if you have enough cash, of course, you can procure those skill sets, but it would be very important to actually get support from mentors and from advisors that help you on the things that you're lacking, so that you can actually accelerate on those topics while focusing on your core business and have that strategy and have that ready as you move forward. This is super important. Some of the places where I've been very fortunate to find a lot of good mentors, I think through the EIT health programs that we've seen, we've had other areas as well, which I can definitely share with you offline, and look into where you can tap into resources. But for now, if there are any questions, more than happy to take it. But at the same time, I realized in the previous one I did not share my contact details, but if you scan this, you'll connect with me on LinkedIn, or you can email me over here. So a quick screenshot would be good. If not, I'll ask the team to share my contact details.
Anish, thank you so much for your question. Oh, sorry, for the presentation. I wanted to say that we do have question in
Brilliant.
Q&A section. So shall I read it out loud,
Yeah,
or
no,
you can
I'm on
hold?
it. So Greta,
Okay. Mm.
Anish, are you also an investor interested in how much startups are prepared in terms of sustainability topics, ESG groups? I think resources, carbon footprint might influence investor decisions. Absolutely, absolutely. So I'm an investor right now. I do invest in very early stage companies because that's where I feel I can add the most value on there. And in terms of the sustainability topics, uh, to be very honest with you, I've been on sustainability programs throughout my pharma career, and also right now. From a carbon footprint perspective, there's a lot of things from a regulation perspective that needs to change. And I'll give you a simple example, right? So the injections that we are using today, right, for anything, for even blood tests and things like that, are made out of plastic, right? Now, in order to change that, you actually have to go back to most of the regulators, ask them for what that baseline would be, and change that. In terms of bottles that are used for syrups and things like that, that is also an issue because you need to find different products that will actually be able to store, and if those are refrigerated, that they do not create condensation within medications or create any kind of effect on that. So within health, it's actually possible, but still not implemented because there are so many barriers to make that change happen that we don't do it. But on the digital health side and on the medtech side, with most of the companies that we are working with, or one of the decisions that I made as even a small investor is we are looking into wherever there is use of plastic, we are looking into companies that actually use recyclable plastic or biodegradable material. So a lot of the companies that we are working with do have 3D printed PLA based material that they use. So even if it is actually thrown out in natural environment, within a specific duration of time, it automatically degrades. So we are actively and more proactively looking into those things. But as an industry standard, I think we need to do a lot more to actually get to that point. But really good question.
So far, we have no questions.
All right, perfect.
Well, then, yeah, thank you for your insightful presentation today. For sure, our participants benefit from this presentation. Thank you.
Perfect,
So
thank
it's
you.
time to move on to our next
Hey, Luis.
part. Yes. So we will move on to soft landing experience shared by two startups. So you will hear from Luis Valente from iLove and Dr. Helge Müller from ProVastec. So they will make a short presentation about their startups, and after that we're going to have a panel discussion chaired by Lola Adanvala from EAT Health. Luis, you are with us. I can see you.
Hi, Irina. How are you? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. And
oh, perfect. Yeah, so hope that the connection holds. Otherwise, I'll need to join on my mobile. I'm on a very, very different time zone today. Yeah, so thanks so much for the invite. Very happy to be here. So I'm Luis. I serve as CEO of iLove. iLove is a deep tech, health tech company working on the personalized medicine space. We've been collecting and integrating massive amounts of multimodal data to help cut time and cost of the way that we develop personalized therapeutics. So the goal and the mission of the company is to help pharmaceutical companies, biotechs, and overall leading research institutes severely cut time and cost of developing personalized therapeutics. We do this both at the clinical and preclinical stage, and we do it using a proprietary optical and AI technology. So it's an AI-powered photonics platform that again allows us to collect very large amounts of data on biological profiles and again, help select the right patients for clinical studies or help refine the drugs that are still being tested on a preclinical stage. So we are an EIT health portfolio company. This is how we've started. We've started on a program that is no longer running called Wildcard that enabled us to be who we are today. And overall, over the course of around 5 years, we ended up raising a bit more than 10 million from different investors in different nationalities and different geographies. And we currently have a team of around 30 people, mostly based in the EU, in Portugal, with a couple of people scattered around Europe, mostly, of course, data scientists and AI engineers. And now very recently, a couple other bases in New York, in Japan, and also in the UK, which has been one of our core bases since the start. Yeah, so I think that's very much about iLove. Irina, very happy to dive deep on any point.
Thank you. So now we move on to the second presentation, right? Helge Müller, now the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and I'd like to bring up my presentation. Can you see it?
Yes.
Perfect. So my name is Holger. I'm the CEO and co-founder, I should say, of ProVastec. And I will tell you a little bit about ProVastec. Obviously, I cannot use all the many beautiful words that Luis used. We are not an AI company. We are a combination between a medical device company and a pharmaceutical company. So what is it actually what we are doing? We start with pro-angiogenic cells. Now, in case you don't know what that means, these are cells that can create new arteries. And we use these cells and load them onto a carrier, where this is actually the core of our innovation. The cells are standard. You can buy them off the shelf, but we load them on a carrier. And this carrier allows us to place the cells at the place of medical need within the artery. Now, what you can see here is a blocked artery. And why do we all do this? That has two reasons. Number one is with our carrier, we can significantly prolong the life and the functionality of the cells. And with this, we enable the creation of a new arterial network that goes around the blockage, and that solves the medical problem that's called critical limb ischemia. So it's a blockage of the arteries in your legs or arms, typically seen in diabetic patients, and the severe consequences, if not treated well, is an amputation. Now, if that sounds interesting to you, you might ask yourself the question, how do I get this job? And for me, it started very basic. But before I tell you how I arrived there, I think you have two potential avenues to arrive at such a position. And previously, we also talked about co-founder and CEO. But for me, the two options are either you are smart and it's your idea, and naturally you become the creator of the company and the spiritus rector of the company, or like in my case, you rely on people who are smart and you join via a job ad. Now, when I saw the job ad for the first time, I asked myself the question, is this an attractive project? And for me, the answer was yes at the time. It's probably similar questions that we saw before, but just to give you some idea about the questions that I asked myself. Is it risky? Yes, everything in the startup world is risky, but I felt that project was slightly de-risked because it has solid clinical experience. It was also a combination of using established building blocks. So we are using something that's already there, and we are using non-modified cells that slightly reduces the regulatory hurdles that we also heard about before. Now, what made me curious is, and this goes back to a presentation, an aspect of the presentation we also heard before. Should you be a co-founder or should you be a CEO? The inventor of the technology was aware that he would probably not the ideal businessman. He is now the chief scientific officer, and we have very complementary experiences. So for me, that was a plus because I could bring in my experience, and we have now a very complementary team, which I think is very crucial if you want to move forward, that you have an aligned leadership. Then I found also intriguing that you have a combination between a therapeutic and a medical device. That means we are crossing the typical innovation barriers that are in the pharmaceutical industry and the medical device industry, which for our competitors creates additional hurdles. And that's why we think we have a advantage here as a first mover. And then, as you can see it, we are a Cork-based startup. I'm personally not a Corkian. Actually, I'm not even an Irishman. But I found it very intriguing to learn something about Ireland as a company. And to give you a heads up already, it hasn't disappointed so far. Now, where do we stand today? Very briefly, when we raised our seed funding, we laid out our plan, but in our seed round, we focus on the current 2 years. Now, the first thing that we did is we were asking ourselves the question, do we need to do everything ourselves? And the answer was no. We went for a slightly different model, not only advisors, but we went with collaboration partners. So we created a consortium of 3 companies based across Europe that pursue different activities. And with that, we could significantly reduce our investment requirements because we were leveraging existing knowledge and existing infrastructure. That idea was supported by the European Union. So we received some 2 million from the European Union to finance our collaborators. Still, we needed to raise a little bit money for ourselves, and I'm very pleased to tell you that end of last year we closed our seed financing round. We are now financed for the next 2 years, and you will hear a little bit more of my experience with fundraising in the panel just following this presentation. So let me stop here and see if there are any questions.
Great, perfect. Yeah, I mean, I would just be answering the panel discussion. I mean, I have a couple of questions for you both actually. And I mean, for the audience also, if you have any questions, please feel free to put it in the chat, or just also you can raise your hand and if you would like to speak. So yeah, so my name is Lola and I work at EIT Health, and nice to meet you both. So just to head straight into the question, so I have some questions prepared. And I think my first question is in regards to actually market expansion. And it was very interesting to hear that you both, I mean, outside of your primary regional base, you've also expanded into other markets. And I mean, for most of the startups in this webinar right now, they're mostly Ukrainian startups, right, looking to expand into the European markets. So I think what would be very nice to hear from you both is when you're like actually planning your soft landing, what are like maybe you can just put like 3 critical steps that are very important for you when you're planning to expand into another market. For example, Luis, you even shared about expanding beyond just the European market. You've spoken about the US market, the Japanese market. And also, Holger, you talked about forming a consortium and collaborating across region in Europe. So what are like those key steps that you actually would say to like the startups in this webinar right now, like the key steps, the 3 key steps that they should look at when they are planning the soft landing in regions outside of their primary base?
Happy to let Olga go first.
Okay.
I was about to say the same, but you beat me to it. So let me be clear. We at Provastec don't have a product on the market yet. So we are not necessarily thinking about market expansion. Now, why did we think about having collaborators in Europe, and how did we go about it? So for us, there is what I would call a trend since a couple of years in the pharmaceutical biotech industry or small company industry that can be described as virtual companies. So you have a very small core team that owns the IP, but you leverage existing processes and infrastructure. And that was that's a model that I certainly believe in. You don't have to reinvent the wheel if there is already a wheel somewhere else. And then how did we find our collaborators? That is probably very specific for us. We had very specific scientific needs that we were looking for partners, and we web searched, selected partners, and then we were exploring 2 avenues. Avenue number 1, do they actually have these technical skills? And avenue 2, do we like to work with them? Because I think the beauty of a startup is that you are surrounded by people for a prolonged period of time during your day. So you better make sure that you engage with people you like to work with. And so far, I think these have proven to be true for both of our collaborators. And that's why I said briefly in my presentation, it's the coolest job, and it gives me personally a lot of personal satisfaction.
Perfect. I can echo a lot of the overall ideas that Olga was sharing. So we are also a deep tech company. So for a long time we weren't in the market. We are now. We have some revenue, and so we can already speak about commercial expansion. We're still very much and see ourselves as a startup. I don't think we're still at scale up territory, but we do start to see it expansion, and we do start to see it using tools that can help us with expansion, which is basically what soft landing is. So I'll give you an example. So today I'm dialing in from Korea. I've been spending the last couple of weeks between Japan, Korea, and this is an area that is quite interesting for us and for the company. And in each of these markets, we are only being able to expand and to actually generate some traction with the help of either local partners, local investors, programs, and we're making use of the tools that we have at our disposal. And we've historically had very, very good results in using local partners in a kind of a win-win situation to explore new markets. So, for example, now in the US, we are, we've opened an operation. We're most likely going to be setting also a the legal entity. We're hiring people, and the reality is that most of it was accelerated through having a local investors participating in soft landing, and because it's just each market has their own differences. You end up, especially in early stage, you sell through your network. So if your network is not in that geography, then you're an outsider. It's going to be very hard to scale the business, really create impact. And this is really where, again, the soft landing in there's various shapes and forms can help, because it artificially equips you with the network that you do not have. It artificially equips you with the information and knowledge that you do not have. And it allows you to grow and propel the company a lot faster. And I don't think ILOF would be, and again, even though, again, EU and also the UK at some point is our cradle and has been our core, and has been supporting us quite a lot in an incredible number of ways. I don't believe that ILOF would be the company that it is today if we didn't took the effort, time, and capital, I guess, to expand into geographies such as the US and such as Japan. Clearly, because these also affected the way we are perceived. These affected also venture capital, so the capital amount that is accessible. So yeah, and I always think that so most deep tech companies, they call themselves deep tech companies because they're solving hard problems. And they're solving hard problems that are worth solving, because normally they affect a very large number of people, and then they are kind of problems that are hard because they're fundamentally difficult to solve, but also they affect and impact in some way the majority of the human race. So when you're dealing and solving a problem that affects the majority of the world population, you cannot just stay in your home base and pretend that the rest of the world doesn't exist. You need to get out of the lab. You need to go to other markets. And of course, you need to do it when you're ready and actually when you have a value proposition to show. But you need to do it, and in my vision, you need to do it sooner rather than later, especially with geographies such as the US.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Louise. And so just building up on that, because from what you both said, I heard a lot of kind of networking. I mean, I could sum up a lot of the things you both said into networking. So now bringing it back specifically to the European market. I mean, for a Ukrainian startup like looking to expand into the European market, what would be your advice when it comes to networking? I mean, that some might not have that network already established, so they are looking to really scale that network and integrate into the market. So how would you say is the best approach for them to go about actually establishing that network so they would be able to leverage it? Because I mean, like you said, Louis, looking into, you cannot hit the ground without having someone on the ground to help you navigate through the market. You need local knowledge, right? So how would you say, maybe like at the events or things you could suggest, maybe share in the chat, that you would say, okay, go to this place and this could be a good start point for you to actually build that strong network that you would need within the life sciences space to be able to like expand into the market?
So I can go first. So there's a couple of events, and there's a couple of resources that are accessible to most European founders that I would recommend. So in terms of events, and again, my comment is going to be heavily biased towards deep tech, health tech, because that's where I've been building for the last 5 years. So in terms of events, there's a couple that are quite good. So the Hello Tomorrow, which used to be in Paris, used to be a very good gathering of deep tech minds, highly advised. We made some very good connections, especially if you're looking into, well, again, I understand there might be now changes on the location of that event, but it used to be a very, very good event if you wanted to get into the French ecosystem and overall into other European ecosystems. If you're looking to not sell a product, but selling equity, right? So fundraising, which is basically selling equity. The Hello Tomorrow had a very, very good investors day where you you kind of speed date quite a couple of dozens of investors in a day, literally speed dating. That was very good, a very good experience. I recommend it, especially to early stage pre-series A pre-series A founders. So seed and pre-seed, I'll very much recommend it. In terms of events, I'm also going to recommend just one more, which is Slush in Helsinki. Also slightly less deep tech, but also equally quite good event, and with investors from very different geographies than the ones that normally are present in most of these events. So that I would recommend. Then in terms of programs, the European Commission has quite a few programs for SMEs, for soft landing for SMEs, especially the trade bureaus and the external trade bureaus. They support companies into going to trade missions, into going to conferences, into engaging even in matchmaking kind of into matchmaking events. So I was sharing that I'm now in Korea. I'm here with the EU trade mission that I got invited to attend, where it's a lot simpler, right? Because you get support to schedule meetings, you get support to meet people, you get invited to have a booth at an event where people are already going to be there because there's a ton of companies in your sector. You just need to keep your eye open, and there's quite a few of these initiatives. And then again, if you're very, very early stage and you're willing to spend some time, there's a couple of acceleration programs. I mean, each region has, so UK would have one, France would have one, Portugal will have one. Each one of these regions has like one leading, sometimes two, but certainly one leading accelerator. And some of them, they don't take equity, especially if they don't take equity, if they're well reputed, and if you have the bandwidth, then this is also an amazing way. So for example, in the US region, we relied a lot on this equity-free kind of acceleration programs, very competitive, of course, but equity-free. Yeah, and again, there's quite a few that I would recommend, but I'm also happy to, I mean, if anyone has and wants a deeper walkthrough about what would be my recommendation for a particular country, feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn. Very happy to grab some coffee and chat.
Perfect. Thank you, Luis. No, you can go, Holger.
Yeah, maybe I can quickly add my perspective, which is slightly complementary to what Luis said. And this may be because I'm predominantly operating in the pharmaceutical and medical device industry, which may or may not be so geographically diverse. My experience is more that the investors I had most traction with are investors that are probably less prone to our technology, but more prone to our geographical proximity. So I had very good experiences with network events and investor events in Ireland, where as I understand it, as a foreigner to the Irish market, it's very important to get a feel for the person that you are giving the money. So showing up in person is very important. Now I understand that there may be several reasons why this may not be so easy for everybody. But this is now the advertisement block for Access Big, and it's not rehearsed. But I found it extremely useful to be invited for the Venture Academy and other local Irish events that gave me the possibility to introduce our project to investors who then also subsequently invested. I would agree with Luis that several countries have similar kinds of programs, be it soft landing programs to go to other markets like trade missions, or also these matchmaking events on a more national scale. I also had good experiences with these events.
Perfect. Thank you both so much. So I think I would move on to another topic now, just because we also listened both the prior presentations before the session on regulations. And I mean, we all know when it comes to the life science medical space and digital health, it's quite complicated when it comes to navigating the space, especially for SMEs, right? So I think my question for you both would be when it comes to actually navigating through this regulatory sandbox and compliance related topics, how was it for you when it comes to your product and getting it into the market? How did you identify what kind of certifications do you need? Because also when you talk about different regions, right, different regulations, and sometimes, how were you able to fully navigate through this? And also building on I know Holga said earlier, like for them, they have a lower regulatory risk considering their product. But then, Luis, for you, you're in the AI space. I mean, we all know within Europe right now, when it comes to AI and digital health, it could be quite complicated to some extent, especially with the EU Act coming into force also. So just to get your perspective when it comes to this and your advice to SMEs that are listening to you right now when it comes to being able to successfully navigate through regulation and compliance within the space.
Luis, shall we continue our tag team here, and then I go first and you take the next question first?
I'll let you go first, yes.
Excellent. So unfortunately, Lola, I wish I would have more encouraging news for you and everybody on the panel here. But navigating the regulatory world is not an easy task. Even though if I said it's easier, it was with specific regards to the type of cells we are using. But the hurdle is still significant, and we approached it in a stepwise way. Luckily, I have a background in the pharmaceutical industry, so I was, for me, it was not a start from zero, but I did have some background knowledge even before I joined the company. I thought I understand what might happen. And then I confirmed this with experts. Experts you can find in two ways. We talked about the scientific advisories in a prior presentation. You can also buy these experts. They are not cheap, but they will give you then a confirmation. But the ultimate litmus test, and that's something that we are still facing here at Provastec, is you need to go to the regulator. In order to go there, you need to be well prepared. I recommend that you definitely go with a person who has written these documents before and supports you in developing them. But it's good to understand, at least from my perspective, two things. What class of regulation do you fall under? We heard various things from cell therapy to small molecule to digital therapeutic to nutraceuticals. That's number one. And then if you think about geographic expansion, it's also good to understand how similar the regulations are between countries. So for example, Luis is now in Korea. we would be probably targeting Korea and Japan as well, because they have a very special regulatory avenue for cell therapies. So that's more advantageous actually as the FDA and EMA. And that is something we would like to present to the local authorities there. But ultimately, you need to muddle through, and most likely you cannot do without severe outside expertise.
Thanks. Jay, I'm going to echo all Olga's words here. And first of all, just to close the loop on the initial question on the regulatory. So even though we are AI, and again, even though AI has been under a lot of pressure regarding regulation and the AI Act and so on and so forth, a lot of that is also just talk, to be honest. I mean, it doesn't, but a lot of it exists, and a lot of it is real regulation that companies need to abide to. It's both a talking point and real regulation, but the split between the two, it's anyone's guess. But anyway, in our case, it doesn't hit us so hard because we are mostly working within the drug discovery and drug development space, which means that we are under the research use only exemption in most of the markets. So US, EU, Japan, Korea, we are mostly delivering drug discovery and drug development, or we're delivering services to drug discovery and drug development, which means that we are under the research use only exemption, which means that we do not need formal regulatory approval to sell our services, which doesn't mean we don't want to do it. So we are 1345 certified. We're certified as a medical device manufacturer, even though we don't have a medical device currently or in the market, or at least not a product that is marketed in that way. And we have worked with consultants to bring this expertise into the company that we didn't have. Even if we had like an assignated person to quality issues, to certification matters, regulatory matters, we in Europe, in the US, so we're currently using some of the clinical trials that were deployed to collect data that would be used to make a FDA filing, a Q sub, and we're doing this process with the FDA with the support of very, very good experts. Yeah, I don't think that especially as a small startup, I really don't believe that you can have the expertise or want to have the expertise to really do this by yourself. And again, you also need to understand your strategic goals. So I know quite a few companies that on purpose say, I'm not going to be doing a regulatory path until after Series A. And then most of my fundraising metrics are going to be around product development, are going to be around pilots, and it's going to be around other metrics around assets, publications, team, and so on and so forth. And I will not go through the hoops of regulatory because it's going to change my company. I'll end up creating a lot of processes that maybe are going to slow me down and so on and so forth. But again, that's an individual strategy that each company did to follow. But regardless of that, I don't think that in an early stage, a company can actually have this expertise in-house and do it all by themselves.
Great, perfect. So, I mean, I think it's very nice that you pointed out you have to understand your specific company, what is your strategic goal, and aligning it when it comes to really figuring out how you want to navigate through whatever regulation applies to your product, right? And I have two more questions for you both, actually, and we have 6 more minutes. So if you could as brief as possible, so we're able to finish at 4 p.m. CET on the dot. So I think the first question, I mean, it's good that you both already mentioned the fundraising part. So there will be more discussion around that in the next session, right? But just to also pick your brain around this as an entrepreneur who is navigating through the space, when it comes to fundraising, how would you view it? I mean, Luis, you mentioned that you already raised funds, right? Would you advise a startup to focus on fundraising before expanding into a market? Or would you say, no, fundraise after your expansion? How do you actually align it? What has specifically worked for you? And what would you say is the way to go when it comes to, I mean, fundraising, expansion? What comes first? What do you put as a priority at each stage?
So that's a good question. Fundraising is sales. It's sales. You're just selling a different product. I mean, and you're just selling equity. But fundraising is sales. And the reality is that fundraising in a certain market means that you are on that market in some way or in some form of capacity, right? And again, maybe you're physically, maybe you're virtually, but the reality is that, again, fundraising is sales. So raising money from a certain market means that you're ready and that you're there. On the other hand, raising money from US investors to grow in the US is a very wise move. It's an incredibly wise move. And it's a move that we've used. And it's a move for in Japan, right? We're now entering the Japanese market. We have a partner that is helping us, and it's, well, in many forms and ways. In the US, we're now scaling in the US market. We have a partner in the US on the ground that is helping us in many forms and capacities. But the reality is that when we brought these partners in, the whole idea was already, hey, you're based in the US, we want to scale in the US, this is our business plan, let's do this. And we targeted them also in a way, in a specific way. Now, of course, some of them will say, okay, you need more traction points in the US before I invest in you. Because we don't want to be doing all the heavy lifting. We want you to already have a footprint here in this geography. And some others will say, you know what, I'll help you do it, it's fine. Yeah, you can absolutely raise without having already a presence there. The same way that you can sell without having a certain presence there. It's just a bit harder, and you need to target the right investors. But it's doable.
Thank you.
Yeah, for us, the situation is probably slightly different. We can only go into a market with a product once we have approval there. So what we would like to do is, what we definitely need to do is raise the money first before we can go there. And what one option is in the pharmaceutical industry is local licenses. So that's probably a strategy that we will pursue in the Asian markets. In the US, it's slightly different. There you have a sufficient and well-established venture capital. So we would go there, as Luis said, potentially to grow the business locally.
Great. So just 2 more minutes. I would just give you both just one more minute to just round up. Like when you look at expansion within the life sciences industry, what are the major trends that you would say startups should look out for? And just the general advice to startups that are within the space and looking to scale up.
Sorry, major trends in the pharmaceutical industry?
No, the major trends when it comes to expansion within the life sciences space, and just the general advice to startups that are looking to expand with outside of their geographical zone, for example, Ukraine into the European market.
Luis, I'm counting on you here because I'm not sure I have a smart response here, to be honest.
Can you repeat the question? Sorry, it cut it off on my end a little bit. Apologies.
Okay, sorry for that. So yeah, I mean, just to round up, just like when you look at expansion within the life sciences space, what are the trends that you've observed in recent times, and what just the final advice to startups on what to look out for and how to be able to scale up within the space when it comes to expansion and soft landing?
Yes. Again, so the facts and as much as Europe, and I'm very optimistic about the European future in health tech and in deep tech. And so if you ask me about the trend in the last month, yeah, everyone seems to believe that some of the money that is now being thrown into, well, military is going to trickle down into deep tech and innovation and eventually find its way into healthcare. Yeah, the reality is that overall, the trend was still that most of the money is actually in the US East Coast, and that eventually, if you want to raise a B round and a C round, you should go into Boston, you should go into New York, I would say, but certainly Boston. And this is where most of the companies will actually fundraise. So this is the trend. And again, I really encourage you to find a good local partner, investor, or an accelerator program, apply, dedicate time, dedicate effort, spend time on the ground, and become local.
Perfect. Thank you both so much. And yeah, we're right on time. And yeah, I think that would be the end of this panel discussion. It's been such an insightful discussion. I learned a lot from you both. So I will just hand it over to Irina, and yeah, enjoy the rest of the session.
Yeah, Luis, Lola, Helge, thank you so much for such a productive and insightful discussion. Now it's time to move on to our next topic, which is the investment landscape and funding opportunities in health, life science, and medtech. And a very warm welcome to our industry experts, Emily Ryan from Eros Investment Syndicate, Magda Krakowiak, Accelerator Director Venture Sourcing from EET Health, Dr. Helge Müller from Provas Tech, and this discussion is chaired by Larry O'Donoghue from Axis Peak. So let's start.
Excellent, Irina. Thank you so much. So Holger, they're working you hard today. You're doing two presentation and a panel, and you're going to do our panel now again. So you're really earning your big fees today. Anyway, great to see everybody again. Hi, Emily. Hi, Magda. Thanks so much for help, and well done to everybody so far on this workshop today. So yeah, look, we're going to discuss just get your views on what the landscape is like for life sciences at the moment. And that's a pretty big subject for sure. From our own point of view in Access BIC, we're very familiar with the Irish fundraising landscape, how things have changed over the last few years. We've been involved, and the BICs in Ireland have been involved in fundraising in Ireland for the last 17, 18 years. So we started the Angel Network in Ireland a long time ago and helped to grow that. We've very familiar with running investment syndicates, working with deep tech startups and preparing them for taking on investment. So that's kind of a little bit of our background in investment raising. We worked with Holger and Provas Tech to date, and we work very closely with Eris Investments as well, through the Boole Investment Syndicate that we run here in Ireland as well. So what I might just ask Emily, maybe to introduce yourself and just give us a little bit of background to Eris, and good to see you again.
Yeah. You too, Larry. Thank you. So I am I'm one of the managing directors of Eris Investments. So I'm sure probably a lot of people may be familiar with it if you're familiar with the fundraising environment in Ireland. If not, Eris is a large investment syndicate. So we have about 55 members at the moment. We were set up in 2012. And since then, we have invested just over 70 million in startups in Ireland and outside of Ireland. Probably half of that we have invested in the last 3 years. So it's really grown in the last 3 years, both in terms of the volume of investments that we have done and in terms of the size of the investment that we have done. So we have invested in about 38 companies to date, and we've had about 12 exits. So that's sort of the main introduction to Eris. And we work alongside a lot of others. Yeah.
That's really interesting, actually. Like at a time, so over the last 3 years, you've been exploding in terms of the investment you've been doing, while kind of globally, that's been a kind of a downturn in investment. So that's
I think it's I think, you know, it is interesting. I think what we have found hugely in the last few years, I don't know, I suspect there's probably a few reasons. So I'm sure, as you know, if there's founders on the call here and people who have been raising money in the last few years, certainly what we have seen definitely last year and this year is a huge increase in the number of companies coming to us for follow-on investments, whereby they thought that they would be raising a Series A at this point, a sort of between 5 and 10 million. And that Series A investment door seems to have shut in the last sort of 18 months. It seems to be a really difficult amount to raise. A lot of the VCs, I think, you know, have reduced their investment amount, and so it has sort of fallen on angel investors, I think, to bridge that gap. That's certainly what we have seen. So companies of ours that may have been raising or planned to raise a 5 million round, then raised maybe a 1 or 2 million bridging round to get them that little bit further until the fundraising market at that stage opens up a little more. So I'm not sure if other people have seen that, but we certainly have.
Yeah. I think that makes sense. Actually, it's more of a focus on portfolio clients, and especially during COVID, keeping those companies afloat and alive, or keeping the good ones inside the portfolio afloat. And I think that's probably been that's reflected within the VC world as well. Is a lot of the new fund money into VCs has been focused on existing portfolio rather than necessarily investing in first or second round into new portfolio companies.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think that trickles down then. So where they're maintaining their portfolio companies, they've sort of shut the door to new ones, which would be small for them at the 5 million mark. So it trickles back down to us.
Yeah. Oh, very interesting. And like that kind of, your ticket size is kind of big actually when you think about, when you talk about angel, you're thinking of smaller chunks of money, 10, 20, 30K per angel, maybe across a number of angels, but you're putting in pretty big check sizes into companies. So even though it's angel, it feels a bit more like VC ticket size.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we're not a fund, we are deal by deal, so we look at every deal individually, and the members decide on each deal individually. But for a new investment now, we would look for an interest amongst our members of over 400,000 usually for us to go to due diligence. And so generally, I was just taking a look at our numbers before coming on, just to see what our average size deal is. So our average size deal is now about 750,000, but we have probably over the last 3 years, that's actually probably about 1 million. And we have done some rounds as large as 4 million. So it has definitely grown. Yeah.
Well, thankfully for the investment climate in Ireland, it has grown. That isn't a story everywhere. Okay, Emily, thanks. I'll come back to you in a second there. So Magda, good afternoon. How are you?
Very good. Hello from sunny Brussels.
So gorgeous. Well, hello from sunny Cork here as well. Cold but sunny. So Magda, EIT Health. Just tell us a little bit about your role. Actually, I think you've got a very interesting title in EIT Health. So you might tell us a bit about what EIT Health do and what your role specifically is.
Right. Thank you so much, and thank you for having me. Yes, my name is Magda Krakowiak. I'm a director in the EIT Health Accelerator, and essentially, as part of my role, I'm responsible for the planning of the portfolio and support programs and the mechanisms that we have to support, let's say, startups and scale-ups across Europe. So we don't have a focus on specific geography, but we work with the ecosystems across Europe, and all and any startups, essentially from countries, European member states countries, but also Horizon Europe associated countries can apply and benefit from the support mechanisms that we have. On my background, because maybe this will also shine through a little bit of the comments that I will be making in today's panel. I'm a lawyer by background. I came to the innovation in a very, let's say, unusual way. I very quickly understood that lawyering is not actually for me. That I do have a passion for innovation, and where others see barriers, I see rather opportunities. So it's not a great quality for a lawyer. So so here I am working for 12 years now in the innovation space. My happy space is definitely working with problem solution fit. So I was super happy to see Luis, because I remember when he came with his colleague whose PhD thesis was the basis for the product that they are building right now. And Luis was part of the program that I was actually running at the time as a program manager at EIT Health. So working with researchers and people who have this entrepreneurial drive to realize what commercial potential there might be, what is the problem solution fit, and later on product market fit. This is definitely my happy space. However, I think, this webinar, it's brilliant. There was so much wisdom already shared, and as Emily was speaking, I was nodding a lot, because this is exactly what we see happening across the board. But I think one of the questions that we should ask ourselves is, we are comparing this to the levels of in terms of valuations and in terms of volumes of investment to 2020 and 2021, and maybe it's not a downturn, maybe it's not that the situation is warring on the market. Maybe we have just leveled up or we are leveling up in terms of valuations of the companies, etc., which makes things difficult for the founders, but it also makes the best ones survive. And the turn, or to respond to Emily's point that investors or the startups are looking to bridge funding right now. I think it is we are living in a very special times, and I think that part of this USAID program was one of the reasons. So we had the pandemic, we have the global situation that has changed the focus or made us realize certain things as of 22 with the outbreak of the war, and 25, well, I don't know where to even start, but the situation globally is essentially really challenging. And I think investors are, what we forget often, they are not special creatures. They are people as well. They are also responsible towards their limited partners, so institutions or individuals who are entrusting them their capital. So they have to make wise decisions with regards to allocating this capital. So it is good to have this, let's say, empathetic understanding of what challenges investors face in the world like this. I think each one of us is more careful with our own money. And then when you are being entrusted money of somebody else who has certain expectations, to whom you have made a promise, I think it only makes sense that investors are more careful right now, that valuations, we had big hopes for digital health. We don't see much of the uptake in the healthcare systems, or the process has been really slow. The healthcare systems were also dealing with a lot of challenges. So I think it makes sense. I know it doesn't make it easier for the founders who are trying to raise, but I think that the outlook might not be as grim as some people might be portraying it at the moment.
Yeah, look, I completely agree with you. I think what we saw in kind of 2020, 21, 22 in terms of valuations, that was very much the outlier, and we're returning to a norm, whereas we tend to view that as a down cycle, but I think it's more accurate to kind of view it as a return to normality, if you want to say that. You spoke there, Magda, about your happy place being in innovation and supporting innovation, but you spoke as well about the product market fit or problem solution kind of fit. So that speaks to me about the early stage supports that EIT Health gives to companies. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that, about what stage of companies you're investing in and supporting, and what are the range of supports that EIT Health can give to companies? and what companies across locations are they open to?
Right, of course. So we focus predominantly, or majority of our companies that we support is in the medtech and health tech, or, including digital health and everything blurry in between. For the reasons that our timelines and the budgets that or the tickets that we can allocate to support projects and so on are not big enough to make a dent in terms of biotech development, right, or pharmaceutical development. So this is where primarily our focus is, and the services or the ways of support for the companies. I mean, you could divide this into 4 categories, and this is access to knowledge. So essentially, various programs where mentoring and specific expertise can be obtained. We have connections across Europe. So, for example, a startup looking at, for example, pathways, like care pathways in orthopedic surgeries in France may contact us, and there's a chance that we have an expert who actually can explain how this works in France. So this is access to knowledge, but there's also a lot of trainings. Then there is access to market. So we do have support in terms of working, again, as Luis was saying, with local players, clusters, incubators, etc., who are experts in the local market, and they can explain, they can connect with the people locally and so on. So the soft lending services. It's access to finance. So we predominantly, we work with companies rather, let's say, across the technological readiness level. But when it comes to investments, we are mandated to invest TRL 6 and above. So it is quite mature products. However, we do support companies across the board with fundraising. So we do have a network of more than 120 investors to whom we can provide warm introductions, and we can also work with a startup on the sort of investment readiness level. And the last one is access to stakeholders. Okay, I think it's the one that we didn't talk. So it's essentially connections. Again, if somebody needs a connection to a Portuguese hospital or a place where they want to perform a validation and so on, there is a likelihood that such hospital exists within our network, and we have colleagues based locally who can connect then to such a hospital. We, as part of the sort of the European network of support mechanisms, we also collaborate very closely with EIC. Mm-hmm. So we do have alumni of EIT health programs. They can benefit from a fast track to EIC, meaning they can bypass, or they have a guaranteed right to pass the first stage of the application process to EIC, which also has become, let's say, a very competitive funding mechanism, and obviously it gives an advantage to such companies.
Okay, excellent, Magda. Thank you for covering all of that. Just back to the finance piece again, because given the title of this is the investment landscape and funding opportunities, is there access to grants through EIT Health also, or no?
Yes, so we do have, let's say, those are called innovation projects. So we do have opportunities either for individual companies to apply, but we don't, as a public-private investor, we don't invest. We are never a lead investor. We are usually following private capital. So such companies, they should already have raised money from professional investors. But there are also other mechanisms where a company, let's say, it's not a direct investment, it's a grant to, for example, perform a validation study with one of the partners in our network, which is also, if you are smart about how you are crafting your financial story, I think there is no point in time where non-dilutive funding is a bad idea, right? If you can have a smart partnership with a hospital, where for very often those public big players, they cannot or they don't know how to collaborate on a commercial basis. So you cannot just enter the hospital and tell them, oh, I'm going to pay you to do this for us. But you can make life easier of a PI or a doctor who is very excited about your technology by bringing together an opportunity where there's an EU flag. This is just a grant, so you are immediately taking off the legal department, because you say it's going to be a standard grant agreement. Everybody understands how it works, and this way you can really set the foot in a real healthcare setting in any of the European countries.
Excellent. Okay, Magda, thanks very much. Holger, hopefully you've had a little bit of time to catch your breath and you're ready to speak again. I don't know, I think you've obviously already introduced yourself, so I'm not going to ask you to introduce yourself again. But what I might ask you about, Holger, is specifically that the fundraise that you've just done. Can you talk a little bit about how all of that round of fundraising was put together, and what were they, what was there's always a kind of point in fundraising where it all starts to come together. So what was the trigger point to bring you around together?
Absolutely, with great pleasure. So I have to admit, as pre-setting the scene, my experience is largely focused on the Irish in ecosystem. And why do I say that? Because we knocked on a lot of doors, and at one point in time, we found a door opening up with Enterprise Ireland. And Enterprise Ireland was, on the one hand, very keen on our technology. It would probably fit well into also the ecosystem in Ireland because it has a medical device component. And they gave us an initial thumbs up for investing. Now, this then triggered a cascade of other interested parties, and I'm very happy to say this, Larry. It was also your introduction to the Access Big Venture Venture Academy, where Provastic participated last year. This academy did two things for us. On the one hand, with the mentors that you provided, we were able to hone in on our story and refine it. And on the other hand, it provided us with an opportunity to present to a selected group of investors. And it was a successful opportunity for us to get introduced to investors, and that triggered the next stepping stone. And the final and third stepping stone was probably the environment that the Irish government is putting around startups with an EIIS relief system that then allowed us to tap into retail investors who would also benefit from the financial upside, but also have a tax reduction. And I think all these things together, that they came in very close time or short timeline, and they helped us to really bring the round to a closure. As was said before, it was not an easy climate, and probably still isn't. But without any of these three elements, it would have been even more difficult, if not impossible.
Absolutely, yeah. So look, but I think it's also interesting, Holger. This wasn't your first time round, right? So you have done this several times. I think that gives a certain confidence to investors as well, right?
Maybe, but yeah, probably yes. So I have to say that I wasn't the lead salesperson in my previous ventures, but yes, I did work in startups before and have raised capital before. But building on what I said before during my presentation, I think it was also important that we have a very well-functioning leadership team. Noel, who is the scientific inventor of Provastec, and myself, we have very complementary skills. I think it's fair to say that there's a personal connection, and hopefully that transpires. And I guess that also provides some confidence to investors that these guys, they know what they are doing, and they bring the company forward.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about the team for sure. Holger, I think you put a very good team together to bring that confidence to investors. Emily, I might just come back to you there on Iris again, and just maybe to talk a little bit about your process about screening companies. So how do companies find you? Where do they come from? What kind of stage are they typically at first? Is it only Irish companies? Are you looking internationally as well?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, well, I suppose initially we only looked at Irish companies, but over the past few years we have also invested in companies outside of Ireland. So I would say it's probably about 85% of our investments are Irish companies, but we have also invested in the US. We've invested in companies in the UK. We actually have invested in 2 companies in Sweden. So yeah, we have certainly started to look outside of Ireland, or we certainly consider opportunities outside of Ireland. We no longer just strictly invest in Ireland. Obviously, when it's a company in Ireland, we tend to co-invest quite a lot with yourself, Larry, and Boole. With medtech, we would work a lot with medtech. I think probably in terms of what industries we invest in, I would say that 70% of our investments would be in the medtech area. Then there would be digital health. We have some pharma. We have 1 or 2 environmental technology companies, and AI, which we're certainly seeing a huge increase in. Nearly every company that comes to us at the moment is AI. So, but in terms of where we get our deal flow from, I suppose, it's a mixture. And in the beginning, it was probably a little more difficult when Iris wasn't a known investment body in the country, if you like. Now we get people coming to us to apply for the investment. We will get a lot of referrals through other syndicates in the country. And for anybody who is setting up a syndicate or anything like that, I would say, work with the other syndicates in the same industry as you. It makes things, don't compete with each other. You will help each other. You always need some good co-investors who you can share the due diligence with, and share the risk. And especially, I think for follow-on rounds where you're not the only one trumping up, we certainly like to see a few people on the cap table, so that when a follow-on round comes along, it isn't just down to Iris to fund that round. So in terms of just, I suppose, how we work as well, once we would screen companies, a lot of companies every quarter, probably 10 to 12 companies we would meet with. And we would then select the best 3 of those, and they will go in front of our members. So we have a members meeting once a quarter, and those companies would pitch to our members at that meeting. They have half an hour, like about 15 to 20-minute pitch, and then some questions and answers. And then we would have a discussion afterwards. And I think the discussion part afterwards is where a lot of our members see the value of the syndicate, because you may not be an expert in cardiology, but if a medical device in the cardiology sphere comes to you. We have a couple of cardiologists who are members, and it's very helpful to then. So, you know, as an example, it's great to have that shared experience. And so then our members will let us know if they are interested and for how much, subject to due diligence. And as I said before, if we have interest of about over 400,000, we will proceed to due diligence, and that's how we would invest. So that's just sort of simply how we work. Yeah.
Very good. So that's kind of interesting that you're stepping outside of Ireland and outside a jurisdiction, which wouldn't be a very kind of common thing for angels.
No.
They tend to be quite location specific or within their legal jurisdiction. So that's an interesting trend now that you're starting to invest outside.
Yeah, I think probably for a couple of reasons. My own background would be in medtech, and I previously to being involved, well, actually simultaneously at the same time, that I was involved with Iris. But before I started doing more work with them, I helped run a medical device company that was based in Sweden and had the majority of their sales in Germany. And so I suppose I probably built up a bit of an ecosystem there, and as a result brought some opportunities to Iris. Which opened the door, I think, to us looking outside of Ireland. I think we had been a little afraid to do that before, or weren't sure if our members had the appetite to. One thing that we do find a little trickier when we are investing internationally, if you like, is we seem to have a little less transparency into the companies. So we have started to, we didn't, in the first two companies that we invested in internationally, we didn't look for a board seat, which we would ordinarily do when we invest in a company in Ireland. So we now look for a board seat or a board observer seat, just so that we can have that same transparency into the operations of the company and have the same information flow, if you like.
Okay. You touched on something there, Emily, as well, which we definitely see as it's not a new trend, but it's becoming more commonplace. And this is quite fragmented rounds. So you might have, as like you mentioned there, a syndicate of syndicates. So you might have yourselves, ourselves, and Boole, and maybe the medtech syndicate investing, but that could be alongside a state investor, like a very common. It could be a VC involved as well, and there could even be some crowdfunding in there, as has changed very in Ireland, and I think across Europe as well. It's, you know, crowdfunding would have been the preserve of kind of initially maybe kind of FMCG and kind of consumer goods, but it's moved mainstream into quite large rounds into medical device and life science now, and we've seen that in Ireland. I might actually ask Mike, is that common across Europe as well? So fragmented rounds, I think, is a trend we've seen and will definitely continue for the future. So I think that's part of the landscape at the moment, and it's I think it's definitely going to persist in 2025. I think. What's your feeling?
Yeah, I agree. We have definitely seen a real uptake in crowdfunding. And for a lot of our companies, it has been a good way of filling the round, making, you know, getting that last bit of the round, if you like. I think that the crowdfunding works especially well if you have about half of your round already filled, and you can then use it almost as a top up, if you like. Any of our companies that have done the crowdfunding have found it quite good, and you know, not too onerous. I think that the getting ready for the crowdfunding stage and preparing the materials and the videos and the, you know, is probably the most onerous part of it. But we weren't sure how it would work with the co-investing, if there would be, you know, extra legals and, you know, how it was going to work out. But it works quite well. They're just one entry on the cap table, much like ourselves. When we invest, we're one entry on the cap table, a nominee company. So yeah, we've seen a big rise in the crowdfunding. Probably for the same reasons as we've seen a lot of bridging finance, and it's another option. Yeah.
Look, I might just double back to you on that. So you had a crowdfunding aspect to your round. So at what point did that come in? Was it to complete the round, to finish the round off, or is it similar to what we've just been talking about there?
Similar to what we have been talking to. So we had about commitments for about half, and then the crowdfunding came in. It was a little bit more than a top off, to be fair to everybody, but I think it was essential also for the psychology of the retail investors, that a significant portion of the round was already filled. Starting off with a crowdfunding round is probably not successful or advisable.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that's pretty bang on, Holger. Actually, Magda, we might just come to you here again, and just we talked a little bit about the kind of the trends there from a more European-wide perspective. What have you been seeing as kind of emerging trends across life sciences, and what do you expect those to look like as we continue to move into 2025?
Maybe before I get to this, because I don't know if the audience is catching this, but what we are actually talking about is about giving confidence. We're talking about sharing risks, and very much the investment process, as Luis was talking, that you are selling equity. I would, on top of this, I would say it's building a partnership of resources, right? So there's a team that is dedicating their time and their intellectual property, their energy, effort, and God knows what else goes into building a startup and putting a product on the market. And the investor who is also not providing only capital, but is also providing its network, its understanding of the topic, where things are leaning, etc., etc. So I think forever we've been talking about that the startup should be looking not only for money, they should be looking for smart money, right? And the smart money comes with the connections and with warm introductions and with the knowledge and the experience and so on of an angel investor that really believes in this, etc., etc. So, and those are the things that are, normally if you would like to get it, and I'm not sure if you would get it of a good quality, you'll need to pay a ton of money to get this type of expertise and to have those warm introductions if you can ever buy those. So I think that the trends or what we are seeing happening on the investment market right now is essentially a reflection on how we feel. So there's less people who can very confidently say, oh, this is what's going to be happening, or this is where the industry is going, because so many things are changing. And that's why we are looking at our peers. And one of my good friends and let's say investors herself, she's talking, this whole industry runs on FOMO. So everyone is afraid of missing, the next big thing, right? And it's the opportunities that we didn't take is the ones that we regret the most. So I think that's why we are seeing those syndicates and so on. One thing I really didn't like, and I hope that this is somewhere in the cards that we are going to change, is that the European companies and the innovations from this continent, they still have to go to either to the east or west coast for closing the bigger rounds, right, in life sciences. I think it's really a pity. I think that the European Commission is reflecting about how the regulatory landscape is influencing the adoption and let's say the availability of cutting edge deep tech, especially technologies in Europe. I think we have great research, but we are not really doing amazing when it comes to commercializing it. And there is a massive reflection. There is a consultation happening right now about putting out a strategy for startups and scale-ups at the European level. So this must be part of this reflection on how do we make this capital available in Europe for the VC funds, for the professional investors who can actually make a change in how fast those products are reaching the market. But I would really encourage the founders to think about the looking for investor, it's, you know, it's not only about money, but imagine having a very stubborn board member or a company or an investor who is pulling your company in a totally different direction than you imagined it to be, and this investor having a massive control over your, you know, I mean, a big share of the cap table, etc. I think this partnership and the alignment on the vision is a very important aspect of bringing investors on board.
Absolutely, Magda. Thank you for that. And it's absolutely true. It is, you know, it is all about confidence and that telling that story and bringing that confidence in a unfortunately in an environment where there's a lot of strange things happening at the moment, for sure. Okay, so look, unfortunately, I wasn't kind of keeping too much of an eye on time, but we've actually hit at the end of our allotted time here. So Magda, Emily, Holger in particular, thank you for all of your help today, and Emily, thanks for jumping on again and helping out.
No problem.
And Magda, thank you so much for your insightful comments there and for all of your preparation and commitment to this wonderful initiative in this project. Fionnuala, am I handing back to yourself?
You are indeed. We're just going to close up now. So listen, thanks guys, and thanks Larry for chairing that great session. Really interesting perspectives and a very different view from everybody. So I'm just going to finish up by sharing my screen finally. And here we just want to thank our partners again, EIT Health, who partnered with us for this event. And I also want to share with you the next events that we are organizing. The Market Discovery Workshop for the UK will be on March 25th, and you can register there. We will be sharing all these links with you. The next soft landing workshop, similar to today, based on AI and quantum, will be on March 26th, and cybersecurity on April 30th. And then full details of all upcoming events on the Seeds of Bravery website, and you will find all the details there. So I have nothing left to do but to say thank you to everybody for their participation today. I think there was some very useful information shared with our startups, and thank you all so much for joining us. Goodbye.